This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome to NC Spin. I'm Brad Crone, guest hosting this week for Tom Campbell, who's on vacation. You've seen the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day to get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina. Let me introduce you to our panel of experts. They include syndicated columnist John Hood, Becki Gray with the John Locke Foundation, former state school board chairman Phil Kirk, and Chris Fitzsimon with NC Policy Watch. This week, we'll look at Raise the Age, Campaign 2017, and we'll ask our panel to tell us something that we don't know. But first, the state legislature is sworn in and sworn at. Last week, I saw House Majority Leader John Bell in Kinston and asked him if he was excited about the upcoming session of the General Assembly. He said they were going to be sworn in and sworn at. Well, last Wednesday was opening day and it went very well, but you could feel the tension in the air. Question one to Chris. GOP legislature, Attorney General, now Governor Roy Cooper, Democrat. They're looking at fighting. Who's going to win the fight?
Well, I think we're not going to know for a while. It depends on how you define win. Clearly, the Republicans have the votes to do what they want to, but Governor Cooper has the bully pulpit and has already, I think, expressed or shown that he's willing to use it. It's going to make a lot of speeches this year about what the Republicans don't let him do. I do think they'll work together, but I think they'll also be at odds quite a bit, and we're going to see how effective the bully pulpit can be, because really Governor Cooper has politics of persuasion is about all he has because he doesn't have the votes.
Becki, Governor Cooper picked an open fight with the Republican legislature last week over Medicaid expansion. Clearly, the state law says the governor does not have the authority to seek such sanctions. Where's this fight going to end up on Medicaid expansion?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, and you're exactly right. He has picked a big fight right out of the chute. The General Assembly has punched back and said he can't do this. And if you look at the North Carolina Constitution, if you look at state law, if you look at what the governor is authorized to do, I think it's pretty clear to most people that he can't do this. So where does this end up? I mean, do we go through court? Some people have even mentioned impeachment, which could be very interesting when under the North Carolina Constitution, the House can begin the impeachment proceedings. The Senate then has a court proceeding for the impeachment. The Chief Justice presides over that, and it takes a 2/3 vote for an indictment. And don't forget that the Republicans in the Senate hold 70% of those seats. So this could get very interesting. And this is a fight that I'm guessing Roy Cooper may be sorry that he picked.
But it really is the holy grail for the Republicans right now on Medicaid expansion. And do the Republicans call the governor's bluff?
Well, I think what's going to happen, Brad, to be honest with you, is we're going to wait and see what happens in Washington. You know, that is a key thing that the Republicans and President Trump have talked about they're going to do in Washington. And to be honest with you, I think it would be foolish for North Carolina to do anything until we see what the ACA is going to look like and how that's going to affect Medicaid and what Medicaid is going to look like before we commit the very substantial resources to expanding Medicaid in North Carolina.
John, there's no doubt that our doctors and our healthcare providers would benefit from additional federal Medicaid dollars coming into the state. What's the resistance? President Obama's walking out the door. What do you see the Republicans offering as far as affordable quality health care for working families?
Well, you make a good point about Medicaid. Obviously, the people who receive services are primarily low-income and disabled people, but the individuals who actually get Medicaid dollars are wealthy. They are doctors, they're people who work at hospitals, they're maybe not wealthy, but certainly upper middle class to high income. And the Republicans in Congress, as Becki said, are going to do something about the Medicaid part of the Affordable Care Act. They might change the nature of it, they might block grant it, but also allow some additional groups in, or allow the states to have more flexibility in cost sharing or privatization. So there's all sorts of moving parts. I just think it's premature to imagine what North Carolina's participation in Medicaid is going to be, because Medicaid itself is probably going to look different in 2 years than it does right now.
But health care is going to be a major focus when the new administration sworn in January the 20th, probably the 23rd. Congress is going to start to work on ACA. Will that roll into a solution for North Carolina when it comes to Medicaid?
Well, it's going to be part of the repeal and replace strategy the Republicans have, which will involve Medicaid and the exchanges. That, by the way, is part of the budget reconciliation bill that's left over from last year in Washington. So there's a lot of steps yet to go. The Republicans have more or less the strategy they're going to pursue, I think, and the model for the system going forward, which will be tax credits and more competition and so forth. And Medicaid will be a part of that in some reformed fashion.
Phil, in your seniority here, you've seen a lot of animosity when a new governor comes in with state legislature. Under Governor Holshouser, you were Secretary of Human Resources and Chief of Staff. Under Governor Martin, similar situation, Chief of Staff, then Secretary of Human Resources. How tough is it? Give us your insight on an incoming governor of one party and a legislature of another.
Well, I have chuckled over the last couple of weeks about some people that have short memories. And as you said, I was fortunate or unfortunate, as the case may be, to have been involved in the transition and so on. First place, Holshouser was a little different in that he had been a member of the legislature. So he knew a lot of the legislators. However, the Democrats introduced at least 15 stripping bills, most of which passed, in terms of limiting his authority and even taking the license. One of my jobs was to sign 200 license plates, the low numbers. And they took that away from the governor's office, and I was thrilled because that was the biggest headache. But to show you how petty it got, and then under Governor Martin, I went back and researched that, and don't have time to go through the list. But they actually had a huge fight at press releases and high-level meetings over what date he was going to speak to the legislature. That was a big thing. So, and then they tried to restrict his budget-making authority, transfer funds.
But don't you think the governor still has a lot of authority as far as day-to-day operations?
He does, but this was child's play compared to the way that the Democrats treated Holshouser and Martin, in my opinion.
Well, one big difference is they did that in a normal session of the General Assembly. They didn't do it unannounced and right 4 days before Christmas when nobody knew what was going on. Is the first thing. Second thing is, let's calm down about the talk about impeachment.
Yeah.
Governor Cooper, all he has done is filed an amendment to the North Carolina plan, the Medicaid waiver plan that's going to Washington, which may or may not be approved, likely to be approved by the Obama administration. Medicaid is not going to be expanded without the cooperation and the money by the General Assembly. He's just pushing it as far as he can under the law. He has a lot of attorneys over there. The idea is to push this as far as we can and then see what the legislature does. They may not go along with him, but Medicaid is going to be in place at some point, and it makes sense for North Carolina to follow Mike Pence in Indiana and at least try while we can and get some people some help.
As we wrap up this acrimony, what does it mean for the legislative session? Becki?
I think it's going to be hot and furious. I think we're going to see a lot of vetoes, and I think we're going to see a lot of veto overrides.
John?
I agree with that, but I also think there are some opportunities for the two parties and for the legislature and the governor to cooperate.
Last word to Phil.
I think that it's gotten off to such a rocky start, and I blame both sides, that we might be surprised at the level of cooperation, because right now we're not expecting much of any. And as John said, there are a few areas, and I think we could be pleasantly surprised.
Raising the age for juvenile offenders and state legislative campaigns. That's up next on NC Spin.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The slogan on our family farm is growing the next generation. It means using innovative technology to conserve water and increase yields. It embodies our passion for providing food and fiber for our neighbors near and far. It represents our desire to take care of our employees, our land, and to leave a better place for our children. Farm life isn't easy, but it's a good life, and I love what I do.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
We now return to NC Spin.
North Carolina Supreme Court Chief Justice Mark Martin has signaled his support for a legislative initiative that will raise the age of adult offenders from 16 to 18. There are only 2 states in the nation that have adult offenders at the age of 16, New York and North Carolina. Question 1 to John, will the state legislature be receptive of the Chief Justice on this issue?
Well, Brad, I know the answer to that question with 100% certainty, but if I told you, that would ruin the surprise. So I'll pretend that I don't know. What I'll say about this is that the debate is about whether to automatically charge 16-year-olds as adults. In lots of states, you're going to end up with 16 and 17-year-olds that get charged as adults. It's just a question of what the default rule is. And there has been a growing support for this among Democrats and Republicans in North Carolina, but also in the past there's been some objections to the potential cost of the juvenile system versus the adult system, though the argument is that in the long run you save money. If you reduce recidivism rates, you would save money in the long run. And another concern has to do with certain kinds of crimes that might not fit what we would imagine to be fairly minor. So I still think there's a way for this to get done, and this could be one of those areas that I mentioned in the previous segment where you might get some bipartisan cooperation on this matter. It's happened in other states. This kind of thing has been done with bipartisan votes.
Phil, some of the state's leading district attorneys have voiced concern about raising the age, concern primarily about violent teenage offenders. What do they do with them?
Well, I think that may be part of the compromise about being able to sell it to district attorneys. I think they raise a very good point, and I don't know legally how you do it, but I'm assuming based on your question that they could make some exceptions. So that may be a part of the give and take.
So a lot of flexibility for the district attorneys.
Yeah, but if you have too much, it'll be a meaningless law, but some.
Chris, the other sanctions in the law, last week we saw an article in the Charlotte Observer detailing how teenage offenders were segregated and put in isolation cells. Do you think the legislature would be willing to address some protocols for dealing with juvenile offenders, in particular incarcerated?
Well, I hope so, and I think this whole issue of solitary confinement is really evolving, and the sort of the criminal justice theory and policy about whether is that fair, is it humane, what does it do to actually a person to be in solitary confinement for years, 23 hours a day in one cell, and what happens if those people, if they ever do get out. So I'm not sure that's going to happen this year or be part of this law, but I do think it's part of the overall criminal justice package, which is the issue, not just raise the age, where I do think there's cooperation in terms of expungement, in terms of stop locking up nonviolent drug offenders for years and years and years and making us all pay when they could be out on the street and paying taxes and getting treatment. So I do think this is one broad area that is a bright spot.
Becki, a lot of people have said this is a liberal concept coming from a very conservative Chief Justice. What say you?
I say that's the wrong attitude to have. I agree with John.
Nothing wrong with being liberal.
Of course, or conservative, right? You know, some of these things are just good ideas. They're not liberal ideas or conservative ideas. They're just good ideas, and this is one of those. The other thing is this idea has really been looked at. There was a study done not only in other states, but here in North Carolina, a study done in 2007, again in 2011, another one in 2012, another one that was just released in November of 2016. And what each of these studies have recommended is that we raise the age here in North Carolina. 97% of the youthful offenders are either nonviolent or they're misdemeanors. The prison population for this age group is lower than it ever has been historically. So if we're going to do it, it makes a lot of sense to do it. There is some cost associated
Marilyn
with doing
Avila
this.
was a real advocate
Yes.
for this in the General Assembly. Of course, she was defeated in the elections in November. Will there be a new champion coming out of the House for this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. And Representative Chuck McGrady has already stepped forward. You may know
He's a
that
good man.
he's a good man. He's a good legislator. Has a very thoughtful. He also has run summer camps, and he has seen some of these young people, and he understands and has said he understands the difference between a 15-year-old and an 18-year-old, and the decision making that they go through, the peer pressure, all of those kind of things. And so we expect to see him on this, and there are others in the General Assembly too. I think this is one of those things that we're going to have cooperation. The process is going to be there to get this done right and to address some of the concerns that the district attorneys have.
John, the Conference of District Attorneys in the state are coming to the legislature with a budget request, primarily based on the fact that in the recession they lost about 50 positions, legal assistants, victim witness assistants, investigators. What type of reception do you think the legislature will give the district attorneys saying, please refund these positions?
I hope it'll be favorable. I was on Chief Justice Martin's commission that looked at the judicial system, and while the commission did not recommend large amounts of money, it did observe that there were real funding problems and needs for technology enhancements. This is the first and foremost responsibility of state government to provide for adjudication of disputes and to protect us from crime. I think it needs to be a high priority in the legislature, and I think it will be.
Chris, the other big issue is state funding for the crime lab. I was at 2 swearing-in ceremonies for Superior Court judges in the eastern part of the state last week, and all the law enforcement were talking about the improvements that have been made in the crime lab, and they say they've been significant, especially on certification of their personnel. But what's happening, these people are getting trained, and then other states are coming in, swooping in, and picking the best people out of the crime lab. What can we do to keep our crime lab people certified and paid at a level that's respectable?
Well, we've got to make it a priority in the budget, and we say that every time. There's be a lot of things we could go around this table and say that should be a priority. That's one of them. I think we're going to see a big push for principal pay this year. We already know we're going to give teachers another raise. State employees and state retirees really haven't had a meaningful raise. So we not only have to give all state employees, I think, a raise teacher pay again, give principals a raise, but in these special circumstances where we're losing a lot of crucial people, we need to look at that. We did a little bit of that last year with correctional officers. Governor McCrory had that in his budget, but I think we need to expand that.
The one other issue that I see last year, the Chief Justice really kicked off an effort to fund the information technology component of our courts. Any status report on that right now? Becki, John?
There's a new technology, as part of that of Chief Justice Martin's commission, there's a new plan for technology. And again, it's not just about spending more money, it's about changing the way the system is managed or improving the way the system is managed. We have courts that are using far outdated computers and technology. And if we want citizens to be able to access legal services more efficiently, this is an obvious place to invest.
And Chief Justice Martin will be addressing the General Assembly with a State of the Courts address, if you will. And so those are some of the things that I think we should all be looking for. I think the General Assembly is going to be paying attention. But one quick point I just want to make about the funding, whether it's these positions that the district attorneys want, the crime lab, or anything else. One thing I think the General Assembly is going to be looking for is transparency. We've also had reforms within state government over the last 4 or 5 years. So things might not be working exactly as they were. Take a fresh look at it and fund the needs that are there now.
We'll leave it right there. Just getting over from last year's campaign, guess what? There may be more elections coming in 2017. We'll provide the details next on NC Spin.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
We're working hard every day to save you money, protect what you've earned, and help you and your family as you grow older. When it comes to your personal finances, half of workers in North Carolina don't save for their future. With electronic payroll deductions into a North Carolina small business retirement plan, small businesses could offer retirement savings accounts to their workers, and best of all, there's no liability or ongoing costs to employers or to the state. www.ncworkandsave.org.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
The United States Supreme Court stepped into the legislative redistricting fight this past week, staying a lower court ruling for the new legislative races in 2017. The stay will remain in effect until the Supreme Court decides if they're going to hear the case. So there's a lot of drama and high-stake politics here. Question one to Becki: what should we expect out of the Supreme Court? Will there be a 4-4 split on hearing the case? Will we have oral arguments in October or elections in November?
Well, we don't know yet. The Supreme Court this week did stay the judgment of the 3-judge panel. They are scheduled, it is on their schedule for January 19th, so we should know something. What's kind of interesting about this, if it is a 4-4 split, then it reverts back to the decision of the 3-judge panel. The thing that's kind of interesting on this is Chief Justice Roberts asked the rest of the court to weigh in on the decision on the stay, which is a little bit unusual. And historically, there's at least 5 votes in favor when that kind of circumstance comes up. So that would indicate that things are looking pretty good for the General Assembly in this, but we won't know for sure. And hopefully we'll know soon. It could really impact the General Assembly session, not only if they have to redistrict, but some of the issues that they'd be willing to take up and some of the bigger issues they'd be willing to take up if it is in fact an election year.
Chris, there are reports out of the General Assembly right now that the map-making process is ongoing. Before Rucho left town, I heard there were maps drawn up. And for Democrats, it may be, be careful of what you wish for because it could be bad news. A lot of early indications are that there is a possibility of seeing a lot of double bunking, especially in minority districts.
Well, I think that that's likely, but I still think I think the Democratic consultants will tell you that they think they would gain 3 or 4 seats if enough districts were redrawn. Even if some incumbents were double bunked, there might be other Democratic districts created adjacent to that or in the area. I do think that I was a little interested that some of the Republicans were celebrating this past week as if this was a done deal, and it's far from that. Becki's interpretation may well be true, but Justice Breyer, a couple times lately, has gone along with the majority, gone along with the Republicans as a courtesy to put things on hold while they decide whether or not they want to hear it. This is not at all a guarantee that this is the way the Supreme Court will rule. We still have a chance we'll have elections next year.
John, do you think we'll see the legislature proceed with action early on getting new maps introduced? The 3-judge panel initially said they wanted to see something by the middle of March.
I would guess that even though the stay has been put into place, and even though there's a lot of speculation about what the court's decision means, the initial decision means, I suspect they're still going ahead with planning on the maps just in case. And I think that they will do it in a way, just as we saw the congressional maps. You can order the Republican legislature to redraw maps all day long. Don't expect a Democratic map out of it. It's probably not going to happen. And I would also suggest that in 2017, which is not the year we usually hold legislative elections, it's not exactly clear who's going to turn out and which party would have the advantage. I'm not sure.
That's what I've said consistently.
I'm not sure it's in the Democratic Party's interest to have elections.
Absolutely. The big problem that the Democrats have of getting base vote to turn out, they had a problem with that in 2016. So would they show up in an off year election? Phil, this begs the question, do we get to a redistricting commission at some point in time?
I hope not. I introduced that 45 years ago when I was in the legislature. And by the way, my reasons are stubbornness, not good government. And Senator Ham Horton and I introduced the bill, and he introduced it several more times. And we couldn't even get a hearing on it, much less a vote on it. So I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, talk for a second.
In 140 years, it probably should happen when the Republicans have gotten even.
Talk for a second about the possibility of the federal court judges actually drawing the map. Is that something that we should look at?
I would hope not.
As a part of the process?
No, I'd be strongly in favor of a commission over that.
John?
That is what Republicans have worried about all along, is that this is just a plan to get some Democrats who happen to be judges to draw Democratic maps. That's the way they see it.
Who ends up drawing the maps?
I think the General Assembly will end up drawing the maps. I really do. What we've seen with this through the years is rules that are put into place as to how they have to do it. So every time we have a judicial decision, it's another rule that's put in place that the General Assembly has to comply with.
Chris?
Well, I actually think I disagree with Phil, not only whether or not we should have an independent redistricting process, but I think this confusion about all this, I think this is an issue that continues to grow with public support. I think we're going to see this at some point.
All right, we'll leave it there. The best part of the show is coming up next, learning what we don't know. This is NC Spin.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
It's
It's a fact, patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
We now return to NC Spin.
Welcome back. Viewers often comment that this segment is their favorite. Tell us something we don't know, starting this week with Phil Kirk.
A lot's been made and talked about Republicans winning a lot of races in North Carolina at the state level and the legislative level, but I checked into the county commission levels, and Republicans now control 54 counties with the Board of Commissioners. I actually remember, of course I'm old, when there were 15. There are 343, I believe, Republican commissioners and 260 or so Democrat
You've come a long way, baby. Becki, tell us something we don't know.
During one of the special short sessions, we saw the General Assembly allocate over $200 million for relief for hurricane victims and the fire victims in the western part of the state. There are continued assessments going on of the needs in those areas, everything from shelter, food, infrastructure, small business loans, those kind of things. The General Assembly will take that up again. They will allocate more money, and I think they will also, this is the best example of why we need money into the savings account, into the rainy day fund. And so that's two things that I think we're going to see. First of all, more relief going for those communities and money in savings accounts.
John, tell us something we don't know.
A couple of weeks ago, a newspaper column made the round suggesting that North Carolina was less democratic or about as democratic as Cuba. Lots of liberal friends of mine passed this around. I suspect they didn't go read the study, which also suggested that New York and California were as or less democratic than Cuba. Now, if a Republican had put up, New York less democratic than Cuba, liberals would have laughed at it, and they would have been right.
Chris, you get the last word.
Well, here's something that nobody's really talking about. President Trump is going to take office soon. As one of the most unpopular presidents on his first day. The average approval rating of Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush was 65%. Trump's approval rating is now at 37% and going down. If that continues, that is sort of the shadow over this next couple of years in North Carolina, and I think Republicans at some point are going to be called on to see whether or not they continue to support their president.
It's going to be absolutely intriguing period of time. It's been a pleasure sitting in for Tom Campbell this week. Thank y'all, and thank you. You've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed during the week, visit us on our website at ncspin.com or friend us on Facebook. Join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.